we're not saying we want everybody to get a Bible degree at Parkwood, but at the same time, you got to have specific competencies.
Welcome to the podcast, Distinct People at Distinct Time, where we have a conversation about congregational life in the 21st century. I'm today's host, Jacob Veneer, and with me is Pastor Jeff Long. Moving forward in our series on leadership development, we're moving on from Great Commission team to discussing the next pieces of the funnel, interns and apprentices. Jeff, last week we left off at discussing what are the four pathways from Great Commission team. So could you just review those for us today in our episode?
Yeah, so as you're moving out of Great Commission team, we're asking you to identify these four pathways. Local church workplace ministry, local church vocational ministry. So number one is somebody who's getting a job in the workplace, whatever that is, white collar, blue collar, however you want to say it. You're working in a community and you're part of a local church. Vocational ministry is a person who's earning their living from a local church. North American church planting, somebody planting a church somewhere in the least reach of North America, and international church planting them in the unreached of the world. So those are the four areas.
Very good. So which four of these pathways could lead to an internship at Parkwood and maybe even an apprenticeship?
Well, let's start with internship. Really, all four could lead to it depending on what you're headed down. So like we've had young people who were moving out of the pathway or moving toward a pathway workplace ministry, like being a teacher. We've used them as interns in children's ministry and other areas to help them hone their skills of working with kids. So we're not just randomly going to let somebody, but if it fits and there's something we can help teach and train them, we will do some internships with them. But primarily you're looking at vocational ministry. That's really who we're after. And we would do some base level training with somebody doing church planting, and maybe somebody doing an internship would end up later thinking of those two pathways because we really want people to consider them.
Right. And generally the next step from Great Commission team, if you're going to move forward into one of these pathways, would be internship would be next, or potentially even midterm.
Right.
So could you go over midterm just briefly? What does that look like? Where could you do it?
So it's an internship in North American church planting or international church planting. So you're going, instead of staying here for the summer and working at Parkwood or another local church, you're going to a church plant somewhere and you're serving there basically as an intern for the summer, or with a worker overseas, or in some other capacity. You're doing a summer, 3 months, maybe even up to a year. We wouldn't send somebody a year without first doing an internship here.
Sure.
You know, we want to make sure they're ready for that.
Sure.
But yeah. So that's how you would end up in those places.
Good deal. So looking at the funnel, we'll move from Great Commission team to intern. Pastor Jeff, what is unique about an internship here at Parkwood?
Well, first, an internship is not somebody who's going to go get your coffee and donuts. What I mean by that, in some places, and I've seen a lot of churches do this, an intern is the person doing the total grunt work. That's all they do. You're always looking for something to make an intern do or something to follow up. It's kind of a rite of passage kind of mentality. I don't think that's helpful. I don't think it's helping people. I do think service is crucial.
Right. Hence servant leaders.
And, we offered a job recently to someone who's come through the system. And I said, the day you got my attention is when you were helping cook at a very specific event. And nobody asked you to do that. So we're looking for servant mentality. We're just not trying to break people down by making them do a bunch of different grunt work type activities while they're with us.
That's good. And so in addition to just being beyond grunt work, being beyond just some of those menial rite of passages, we're trying to even rise above, just not doing that. So what else is it?
Okay, so you read this, poured into by a specific ministry leader and given an official job description that serves as a framework to begin gaining practical and specialized ministry experience. So we want to expose them to the realities and expectations of vocational ministry. So what is it really like to do this for a living, and what are the expectations? So thus a job description. Some people think ministry, you just sit around every day and let the Spirit lead you to do whatever you're supposed to do. Now, the Spirit leads us in our work. I don't want to belittle that, but you're not just sitting around figuring out what to do. We all have responsibilities, a clarity of job description. We've talked about, we even do that with volunteers here.
Right.
We want people to gain experience in some kind of specific ministry area, experience what it is like to carry that out, to be evaluated in that and worked through it while they're being supervised and developed at the same time by a ministry leader. That does not necessarily mean a pastor, because we're sitting in a room right now where our production director is putting together, and with him is someone that has been working with him now for over a year and serving in this capacity where they're pouring into him. So it's a ministry leader pouring into somebody else.
That's good. I think that's really helpful just to think, because I think too, in a lot of instances, if you're not a pastor, you can't have an intern in some contexts.
Right.
And I think we realize that ministry is so much more complex than just pastoral ministry. And certainly there's an area for that.
Right.
But then even some areas of pastoral ministry are hard to have an intern. I mean, sure, a 20-year-old could go to the hospital, but to provide that regular kind of pastoral care, maybe not quite, right? Is that fair to say? Am I off there?
Oh, no, you're exactly right. When we've had pastoral interns, they go once or twice in the summer with Pastor David. He just cannot practically have someone with him all the time. It's just not comfortable for the patient or for the person he's going to visit. So he sets those up to take people in.
Right. So another component of ministry development here, particularly on the vocational side, is the 6 C's. And so church, those listening, Pastor Jeff is often not too alliterative. And so this is a unique system. Now, it's not all original to him, though one of them is. So the 6 C's, what are they and why do we have them?
Okay, so they are character, conviction, calling, competency, capacity, and chemistry. Adrian Rogers would be proud.
There you go. Is there a specific order to these C's of which we evaluate, we work towards?
Well, they're laid out in an order of what's got to be true. So character and conviction have to be true of every Christian. We have to have Christian character. We have to believe the truth of Scripture, the truth of the gospel, the base things. So these things have to be established. We can't have somebody pursuing vocational ministry who's not walking with Jesus, and we can't have somebody pursuing Christian ministry who doesn't believe the essentials of the Christian faith. Those things have to be true, but they should be true of every believer.
Right.
So,
well, and I think it'd be fair to say that that's part of Great Commission team, equipping young adults for every area.
Right. So we are really zoning in on these two things. And when you get to pathways, you're asking the calling question, which the word vocation, the Latin word which gets to calling, every Christian has a calling on their life.
Right.
What we're asking in number 3 is, are you called to vocational ministry? Have you been set apart by God for that purpose?
Right. Certainly there's you've got the priesthood of the believer, right? That every Christian is called to ministry in some form.
Right.
But then getting into honing in, you and I have talked about this is kind of the transition C, or it's the bridge into the next 3.
Right. It is to the next 3. Then we're going further. We're asking competency. So this has to do somewhat with your education, your life experience. What are you able to do? What are you able to uniquely perform? What have you learned? What kind of things have you developed into your life? Now, we're not saying we want everybody to get a Bible degree at Parkwood, but at the same time, you got to have specific competency. So I go back to recent hire we did. One of the competencies on there is you have to know how to do social media, because that's how you communicate. So it can be that.
Sure.
But that's not the primary competency. Your abilities with people, your abilities to teach, those kind of things.
Yeah. Well, and if I could just go back up to calling and how it relates to competency, just because you have this certain competency, it may or may not mean that is what you're called to do. And that's where the inward and outward call.
Right. So there has to be an inward call. You have to know in your heart of hearts, convinced of the Lord, that He has set you apart and placed a burden and a call on your life. That's very subjective in some levels. So for years in Baptist life, we have said that inward call, the outward call. So it's not just that what I sense, is what we sense. That's we're a church. We're saying we see this in you. We see this call on your life. Monday night, there was a discussion of we need to be watching what God's doing with this young person.
Right.
We were seeing some things. They've not mentioned it, and we're not going to mention it to them, but it's a matter of prayer for the leaders of the church. This is what we see rumbling and happening.
Well, as you've mentioned in a previous episode, pastors need to be talent scouts.
That's right.
That's kind of what we're getting towards here.
Right. You're paying attention. So you're looking at those companies you're helping someone discover, all right, you're called to vocational ministry, but that's a wide variety of opportunities. So where do your competencies fit? The next is capacity. This is your work ethic. It's your ability to handle pressure. It's your ability to handle complexity, to multitask. So if you're a one task kind of person, and some people are wired that way.
Right. Wired by God to be that.
Yeah. Incredibly focused, incredibly intent. Well, your ministry opportunities vocationally become much smaller because most ministry requires multitasking.
Sure.
You got to be able to do multiple things. You got to be able to go from an absolute crisis to then stand up and teach people maybe in 10 minutes and pull yourself together. Not everybody has that capacity to do that. Sizes of church have to do with different capacity levels. Some people get very tired after 5 or 6 hours of work a day. Some people can work 10 or 12 hours a day,
Well, and even I think stage of life can play into this one as well.
Yeah, I can't work as many hours as I used to, but I can say this: a church as complex and as large as Parkwood requires, if you're not able to work 10 and 12 hour days regularly, you're just not going to have the capacity to go at this work here. And it's different for different people in different places, and we want people to see this. So we do press in. We're going to bring you to the point of stress at times, so you see where is your capacity levels.
Well, and I think of a conversation with a previous intern who has said, "I love the church so much, but I realize I think I'm more gifted to serve in a church that's about 250 people."
Right.
And there is no shame. There's not even an air of righteousness that a smaller church is better than a larger church, nor realizing that someone has a capacity to go on to something even larger than Parkwood. That's just who God is wiring you to be, creating you. Maybe it's for a season. Maybe you do grow into something else, or you realize, no, I need something smaller.
Right.
But having those conversations with young people, it can be difficult. But yeah, I think I was just most encouraged when this young brother said, "No, I think that's what I need to pursue."
Right. And for the pastor listening to us at Pastors 250 is saying, "You're saying I don't work hard." No.
Right.
No, some of the hardest working pastors I know are in small churches. The hardest working pastors I know are bivocational guys who work a job all day, and then those are the guys with high capacity. Good gracious, who can hold down a job and then pastor a church at the same time. That's an ability to and have a family at the same time. So not belittling it. You just got to know where your fit is.
Yeah.
What different kinds of capacities that you have in going at it. The last thing for us is chemistry. And this has to do with the church and the other people you'll be working with. Do we get along with each other? Do we fit? So this is when we're interviewing somebody, we're bringing them in, we put them in multiple different relational contexts to just say, do we like each other? And we tell them that. Do you like us? Do we like you? Are we going to enjoy being together? Now, I'm not saying somebody's not godly.
Right.
I'm not saying they don't have conviction. Personalities are different. And you got to break that down even to the team level. Here at Parkwood, you're going to be on a specific team. Do you get along with that team and enjoy those people that you'd be working with?
Yeah, and this doesn't just necessarily mean are you like us. You're doing a talk this weekend on staffing conflicts and whatnot. And one of the tools we use is Grit Berkman is we realize we all need to be slightly different from one another to complement each other. Right,
and that's essential. One of the things. Chad was one of the first people to say this to me clearly. When Chad was going through the process to come to Parkwood, he said, "You guys are all different." And I said, "That's on purpose.
Right.
I don't want everybody to be the same." So when we say chemistry, we don't mean everybody is the same person.
Right.
We mean, do we complement and work together with one another? And we're asking people to understand that. And it helps people as they go from here to find out where they need to be and what kind of work they need to be doing.
Good. That's good. So keeping these 6 C's in mind, definitely through the intern process. And then for those who would pursue towards the apprenticeship,
Right.
Certainly these 6 C's will continually be in front of them. But could you just overview what the role of an apprentice? What does an apprentice do?
Yeah. So an apprentice is different than an intern. You're developing under a pastor or a ministry leader while taking on pieces of a ministry role to develop and grow. So here's what you have: a job description, but you've got a particular responsibility. So I'll go back to the people sitting in the room. Daniel has now moved up into the apprentice level. Video, which he's sitting behind a camera right now, that's his responsibility.
Right.
So in different areas, you're taking this specific responsibility, we're placing it on you, and we are holding you accountable to do it. So we're teaching that. We've said it already in the podcast. We're teaching that principle. If you don't do your job, then the person above you is going to have to do it. That's not, they have enough to do. You've got to do what you have been given responsibility to do. So we're teaching people to own responsibility. We're evaluating them. Our evaluation steps up here. We're going to expect more of you at this level.
Right.
You could say on some levels we could be more critical, but we also want to be encouraging. Here we're again trying to help you work through those C's, work through who you are, and help you determine where you want to be. Now, an apprentice, we've got to help Parkwood here. An apprentice is not a permanent role. It is intentionally designed to be a 1 or 2 year role. And is not, notice there's not anything past this. The plan is not then you get a full-time job at Parkwood. That happens with some people, but that's not the plan. The plan is to prepare you to move away.
So why the model of ministry apprenticeship versus ministry assistant?
Yeah, we could just hire ministry assistants because all these people are performing things we need to be done. But I need to say that. We don't form apprentices just to form one. It has to be a need we have.
Right. Yeah. Certainly.
Okay. But it's a need that we have that can be rotated every few years and somebody new be redeveloped. An intern should be coming along behind them to take their place. But an assistant is more of a permanent role, and they're just helping a pastor. Not that an apprentice is not helping a pastor, but this is saying more, we're giving this to you to do, and we're going to help you learn from it and grow from it. You're not just here, it's going back to get the coffee and donuts.
Right.
I mean, this is more than that.
Right. So looking at this system, there's lines in between Great Commission team and intern and apprentice and all that.
Right.
What's the danger of moving someone too fast or maybe too slow through this?
All right. So you can move too fast just because you get impressed with something. Now, notice I said something somebody does. You got to look at them comprehensively. You got to take those 6 C's, look at it comprehensively and say, okay, where is this person progressing? All right. They're ready to move from intern to apprentice. Minimum 3 months intern. We're looking 3 months to a year. Some people move faster out of internship to apprenticeship. Just happens. Yeah. Okay. Some people move quicker into that, but we're looking again at 1 to 2 years. We don't want to move too slow with someone that's gifted. We don't want to move too slow if a ministry area starts to develop. Now that's happened here over the last couple of years. I mean, things we've started
during COVID.
Right. We've started things with interns and apprentices, and they just took off. So people moved quicker because the responsibilities stepped up, and they were the ones developing it. So you weren't bringing somebody else in to take it over. Yeah,
that's good. So getting into you, and you've mentioned this. So someone's developed, they've completed the apprenticeship, and they're kind of looking at what's next. Right. Having been there myself, everyone does want to stay. That's definitely a thought that's had. But there is a moment where everyone is sent, and then just providentially for me, I have returned. But how do you make the decision of who stays and who is sent?
Okay. It's the need of the church. So if there is a need in the life of the church and there is someone coming through this funnel that is about to be sent, and that need matches that person, then I think we would be foolish as a church not to match that person with that need. The problem is when somebody comes through and says, I love Parkwood, I want to stay, and they want us to create something. We can't do that. We don't have unlimited funds.
Yeah, if we did that every time.
Right. This would all stop.
Yeah.
So the question really comes down to this. So congregation, let me help you. If we're going to be committed to this, if we're going to do leadership development, people have to go. If everybody stays, it won't be but a few years and leadership development stops. We won't be able to do it anymore. We want the funnel to leak. We want people to go. We want them to go and to go where God's calling them, where God is leading them, and we want to send them. And when we send them, we want to celebrate them. We're going to be celebrating just a few weeks. I'm going to be very practical. Is my future son-in-law, Rylan, who's done a wonderful job here, is the way he's doing.
Amen.
But he's leaving, and right behind him in a few months will be Mary Claire when they get married, moving to Washington, D.C., where he's taking a student position. And as hard as that is for me just as a dad, but us as a church, I mean, he's a gifted young man.
Right.
But we're glad that they're going, and we're going to celebrate their going. So praise the Lord.
Amen. Gaining by losing, right?
That's it, gaining by losing. Well, next time what we're going to do is bring some of them in the room and let you hear from them what it is like to be a part of leadership development, what they've learned, and how God has grown them as a result. And I look forward to that.
As do I.
This has been an episode of Distinct People, Distinct Time, a ministry of Parkwood Baptist Church, where we exist to glorify God by laboring together for the growth of all believers while going with the gospel to all peoples. You can learn more about Parkwood by going to parkwoodonline.org, and you can find resources like this one from the church by going to parkwoodresources.org.